Hello, RoahmMythril here once again, getting back to RoahmMythrill 3, and it's time for the judge commentary on the last couple of stages we just played through. Starting with 113th place, Up Down All Around by Dylan Labiuk, which I am sorry if I'm pronouncing that incorrectly. But this one got a 47.2 total, with a 14 in design, 12.2 in fun, 7 in creativity, 6.2 in aesthetics, and 7.8 in functionality. Mick. Oh boy, there's a lot of gravity flipping here. Up Down All Around is all about swapping between floor and ceiling, and it supplements the concept with temporary platforms, flying rooms, and the occasional combat break. The sections which rely on enemies are dull, with Bounder and Tech being non-threatening throughout, but the gravity swapping sections are inoffensive, occasionally fun, and they have a sense of difficulty curve and climax. I actually rather like the spots where they're used as traps to launch you into spikes. The long hallways of mini flips are great fun, and the Hunter Bee fight, while very easy to beat, was certainly unique. In fact, if there's one issue I have with the intentional design, it's that I found it was too easy. Unfortunately, the level has a few issues on the coding side of things that drag it down. While gyro platforms work perfectly normally on the floor, if you're working upside down, then they rise at the pace of molasses instead. Perhaps that's a dev kit behavior, but it invalidates certain sections so completely that I'm not convinced it was intended. Similarly, air tikis don't do anything if you're on their chin, making them a lot less threatening than normal, and they're already not super threatening. Finding ways to adjust these issues would be a good first priority, and then I'd focus on making the level more interesting. Shinryu. I've always felt that basing an entire stage off gravity flippers was something of an uphill battle. It can definitely be done well, but considering how overused they tend to be in fanworks, and even other entries, it's the kind of gimmick that really needs something alongside it to help the stage in question stand out. And this one doesn't do enough with it, unfortunately. Granted, that's not to say the level doesn't try. There's obviously some thought put into a few of the room layouts and hazards found here, with that spiked section leading up to the end being the most notable one I can think of. And I appreciate the attempt to spice up a dev kit boss by integrating the gravity flippers alongside a unique room layout. That being said, this still ends up feeling like a very bare-bones stage due to several aspects. The short length and lacking aesthetics are certainly a problem, but I place most of the blame on many of the rooms just not being all that interesting to traverse, be it due to very easy-to-bypass stage hazards or enemies whose placement was non-threatening at best, with Surprise Crystal Joe notwithstanding. The segment involving the constant back-and-forth gravity flipping was a step in the right direction, but it doesn't really get explored much since the level was already ending by that point. The last and probably the most interesting thing of note with this level is the rising, falling platforms. This could have been the piece that the gravity flippers were missing, but sadly their use here feels regulated to very basic platforming moments, and one instance of bullying a poor big snaky by trivializing its fight. There's definitely potential here with a gravity flipper plus slow upside-down platform combo, it just needed a bit more polish to shine through. Patchy. 360, 720, 1080. As expected from the title, it's a gravity flipping stage for sure. It's alright in execution. Despite the stage's short length, there is certainly enough variety to keep it interesting. The blocks falling slowly when you are upside down is a unique spin of the whole upside down ordeal. It almost feels like unintentional behavior. Kinda reminds me of Super Mario World hacks in that regard, utilizing strange quirks like that. The music cover is a bit not good, many off notes and with an abrupt looping point. I like what you did there with the boss fight, effectively changing gravity orientation with each jump. Their bullets do kind of blend in with the arrows in the room though. Flashman 85. If good ideas came in a pressurized can, and someone shook that can up and down, and all around, and popped it open, this level is the mess that would be left behind after the explosion. Fighting enemies and dodging spikes while constantly flipping up and down, platforms that fall in slow motion, an upside down battle with Big Snaky, inverted air tiki encounters, these are really neat ideas, but the level is cluttered with ideas, and only the faintest hint of organization ties them together. Almost an entire level's worth of enemies and gimmicks are introduced on the first two screens alone. There's barely any architecture to regulate the flow of the gameplay. Entering a new screen is frequently hazardous, with surprises too close to the entrance and multiple opportunities to end up in a ceiling if you're goofing around. Oh dear, that's another of those I wonder if that was something that was like corrected when they were viewing things, or if I just got lucky. Although the space backgrounds look nice, the rest of the tile work is obtrusive. Insufficient color contrast between foreground and background bricks, and directional arrows that are helpful but don't feel like a natural part of the environment. All this makes it hard to tell where to focus sometimes. Despite my critiques of the tile work, I approve of the artistic instincts on display. The tall windows into space break up the brick sections nicely, and I'm charmed by the decorative nubs under the floor before the last area. The music choices are solid. I like the boss fight and its intriguing use of gravity flipping in lieu of jumping. Using gravity flips as landmines to toss people into ceiling spikes is genius. My recommendation for next time is to gently open the can and carefully pour only half of its contents into the same size glass you spilled all over here. And a spark. It's weird how mindless this level feels. It's not totally unfun, just mindless. The actual level terrain layout is rather deliberate, but the end result is that the player is just sort of flung up, down, all around. I can't say I felt like I was truly in control of the gimmick. Even when instant death gets involved, it becomes an afterthought to avoid, and the few times it catches you off guard could get kind of annoying. Weirdly, the constant checkpoints every other screen do help wallpaper over some of those sections into being tolerable. Whilst the level seems deliberate in allowing the player to mostly hold left or right, what doesn't help is just how much of an utter mess the enemy placement is. Things are just placed off screen for you to fling yourself in as you get your gravity flipped, and having gravity indicators is obviously a boon. The rest of the tiling is inconsistent and just kinda ugly. Not sure what happened to the Gyro Man falling platforms either. They seem to be broken half the time. Was that deliberate? Different graphics could have made it certain that the different gravities were so, instead of feeling like utter chaos. The boss, whilst not harder, is a neat idea. This is very much the type of idea that could be expanded upon and brought into something great if it had a new dedicated fight. It's weird how this level ended up. Maybe I've seen so many other and better gravity flipping levels by this point that something this unpolished and jank fails to make any sort of impact. But that is what happens when a stage truly fails to engage the player. So, overall, this stage, I feel like it falls into the category of inoffensive. It's fine enough, but definitely needed more polish. I do feel like one thing that did stand out like a sore thumb, to its benefit but also to its detriment, were the gravity arrows. It's nice having a solid indicator of which way gravity is going to go, especially if you're going to use them as a trap to fling you into spikes. However, the fact that they're just kind of big, bright arrows just kind of hovering in place, rather than like any kind of tile work to make them look integrated into the background or the stage itself, I feel like that could have helped a bit. It is weird, just some of the things that gravity seems to affect in this stage, like the gyro platforms, which I do wonder if that was just something strange in the engine itself, or if that was intended. And if it was intended, it is a kind of gimmick that I could see finding more use if it was, like, used more carefully. But it is a weird one. It's also weird how the mini air tikis just completely seem to lose interest in me as soon as I flipped gravity. Like, even if they were following me in normal gravity, if I flipped, they just didn't care anymore. And that too, I wonder if that's some weird engine thing, and if so, that's kind of fascinating, and I wonder what causes that. Because that just feels like such a weird thing. But yeah, overall, this stage, I do think it's an okay enough stage. It's fine. I wouldn't say it left that much of a lasting impression. It's fun enough, but it also does fall into one of those traps that I always feel like I'm in danger of when there's just the hovering waves of gravity flippers. I feel like I'm somehow going to accidentally miss-triggering one and slip out of the shape they want me to go through. So, I don't know if that is actually a possible thing to do. I always feel like I'm in danger of it, though, in these kinds of stages. But yeah, overall, not bad. And with that, anything can happen during the jump cut. Welcome back. Nothing happened during the jump cut. So, moving on to 112th place, Stalling for Time by Nadraxiano_TD. And again, I am sorry if I'm not quite saying it in the way that it's intended. I'm honestly just interpreting the names as best I can sometimes. Anyway, this stage got a 47.4 total, with a 15.2 in design, 9.4 in fun, 10.2 in creativity, 9.4 in aesthetics, and 3.2 in functionality. Mick. Okay then, where to begin? Well, the aesthetic is great. It might only be a generic fortress, but with turtles, but it's very well made and it's memorable. The level also has really cool concepts. I like the lead robot master harassing you throughout by blocking off paths, and the literal mini-bosses were adorable and I want 20 of them. Additionally, reading over the level, there's a clear and effective design intent. The tornado rooms seem well built, and while the enemies aren't used very much, the only spot that was outright aggravating is the ladder climb with all the hot dogs. Buster only in there simply is not worth the hassle. Thank goodness for Tornado Blow. However, there's not much better way to say it. This feels like it's held together with prayers, silly string, and duct tape. There are several invisible blocks in the level. One of the tornado generators is missing their graphics. Stall Woman has some very awkward looking flight patterns, though this is more of an aesthetic thing than strictly functionality. And most mystifying, the tornado generators, despite being reskinned Kamigoro tornadoes, cause a lot of zips or just plain don't work. The level is definitely playable, and I feel at least some of these should be fixed for the release, because A, I don't like making players suffer through our shenanigans, B, you'll get a lot of upgrades that we didn't have anyway, but the functionality score is just gone, and that's a crying shame. Nowhere are the problems more apparent than the main boss. Not only are his tornadoes exceptionally buggy, but he's also a severe anticlimax that spams too many tornadoes for his own good. By contrast, Stall Woman's actual fight was a treat. The concepts behind her abilities really should be frustrating, but she's extremely creative, and the survival aspect is so fun that I'm okay with her hoarding 3 tokens. Her time freeze can lead to some cheap hits, but otherwise, the fight is fair, and by the time I got to judging it, the fight was one of the most functional parts of the stage. Incidentally, you can kill her. It requires precise timing with her damage weakness, or using her secret weakness hinted at in the storage room, but pulling it off is so satisfying. I really just love this boss fight. It's a shame the level is so busted. Shinryu. As much as I don't like ragging on technical issues, it's not exactly something that can be avoided here. This was easily the stage where I experienced the most glitches out of any in the contest, to the point where it severely and negatively impacted any sort of enjoyment I got out of it. Just to list off all the bugs I personally found. Stall Woman never followed me the first time I played this level, so I missed out on her central gimmick and was left extremely confused until repeat playthroughs. Yeah, I kinda had that happen, except for me, it's just she didn't even spawn anymore after the first try. Even when she did follow me, Stall Woman would sometimes turn around midway through a screen transition and thus stop following me. Some of the tornado spawners aren't properly displayed on screen during the segment leading up to the second token. There's a pit leading up to the boss that just straight up has platform collision on it. You can kill Stall Woman by using Tornado Blow and thus break the intended point of the fight completely. Very major oversight indeed. I think that might be what I did. That would explain how I just suddenly killed her at one time and didn't even know how. The boss music doesn't play for heavy after fighting Stall Woman. If we look past the bugs, the stage itself is decent-ish. Most of it involves moving platforms over pits and contending with some rather unique enemies. The tiny versions of mini-bosses are certainly fun to look at and fight, but I wouldn't say they totally salvage the level either. The idea of Stall Woman following you through the stage to set up periodic blockades is a novel idea, but not executed well due to the aforementioned glitchy nature of the level. All that aside, we have the end bosses. Heavy, the one past the boss doors proper, is a very rough fight, mostly due to you being pulled up to the ceiling almost constantly via those tornado generators. If we look past those and focus on the boss himself, all he really seems to do is jump, summon Kamigoros, and not much else. Granted, a boss doesn't necessarily need to be complex in order to be good, and I actually really like the idea of using a stage gimmick to support the fight in some way. But when the most difficult part of said fight is trying to hit the boss thanks to how awkward the gimmick makes things, I think that's a sign that this battle should have been reworked a bit. Meanwhile, Stall Woman's fight is just bizarre, though not in a bad way. It's an interesting concept, but one that's easily broken thanks to the aforementioned Tornado Blow oversight. And really, it's just easier to do that than to actually go through with the full survival battle and rack up enough points for keys. The mechanics of which only seem to be explained afterwards. Given how unconventional this fight is, it really seems like the kind of info you should give to the player beforehand. It's a relatively confusing end to a level that, while it has intriguing ideas, was in dire need of more polish. Patchy. Wait, 1000! This is a very bizarre stage, for the wrong reason, because it's also kinda janky in some parts. There are these inconsistent wind currents, sometimes you fall through it completely without even getting pushed up slightly, while jumping into the current from below warps you up weirdly. There's also one point where you're forced to use weapons in order to progress because the downward wind currents straight up refuse to function. Stallwoman, the robot master with the big funny shield, is kinda buggy, where she can get stuck in places. Her shield has a solid hitbox so you can stand on top of it, but you will fall and clip through it when she tries to jump, taking damage in the process. Having her around as you go through the stage is also just kinda awkward. It's not conveyed well whether she's a friend or foe, so it adds to the confusion of what purpose she serves. A moving roadblock would be a sensible conclusion, but half the time she doesn't even block your way. The tiny mini-bosses are a cute idea, but also very annoying to deal with, somewhat tanky foes with erratic attack patterns, and they are placed basically everywhere around the level. The tiny ring guy is the worst defender, as it retains the small hitbox while the rings still deflect shots. Good thing Laser Trident can pierce. Ladder room with the hot dogs. No. The curving nature of their fire shots makes it very hard to determine the safe spots. Then there is the boss fight, where you'd expect to deal with Stallwoman, the person who has been there taunting you the whole time, but instead, you fight, a big lad. The fight consists of you dealing with the wind currents raising up to the ceiling to crush you, while turtles frantically fly all over, making it impossible to avoid taking damage, or even fight the guy that sits well and fine on the floor you are desperately trying to reach. Oddly, no comments about the Stallwoman fight itself. Which is odd. Huh. Flashman 85. Stall Mega Man while we finish building the level is a spectacular premise. What I wanted were construction-themed aesthetics, deliberately slapdash challenges, and a thoroughly silly atmosphere. What I got was this. I don't know what this level is. The first enemy I saw, Stallwoman, behaved so erratically that I could only conclude she wasn't programmed properly. Soon I was inexplicably fighting mini bosses, which are awesome, and riding everywhere on tornadoes, which are not so awesome when they unexpectedly crush you against a ceiling. I got lost accidentally backtracking through whole sections that looked and acted like the way forward. I fought some random boss whose excessive tornadoes behaved differently from all the others, and whose music broke when I left the chamber and came back. I had to piece the narrative together through secret NPCs, whose dialogue needs a proofread. I spent entirely too long deciphering belated instructions to make sense of the exhausting Stallwoman fight. Clear communication is more important than snazzy graphics, modestly well-designed challenges, outrageously clever Power Stoner enemies, or anything else this level has going for it. A level simply doesn't work if players can get all the way to the end without fully comprehending any of what they just experienced. This is one such level. I'll spare you the miscellaneous complaints about how the final token screen shouldn't be able to scroll, etc. The real problems are with planning and time management if Sparkman is to be taken literally. Okay, secret NPCs were mentioned, so I'm guessing Sparkman is maybe part of that? Because yeah, I definitely didn't find that. Playtesting as well. If you had removed Stallwoman, made the level totally linear, and renamed it to something like Mini-Boss Madness, I would have had a blast, and I would have recognized sooner that the boss is actually another thematically relevant hybrid like Power Stoner, and not some robot I misidentified as Stall. And Ace Spark. The level has some relatively neat ideas going for it, but the end product feels unfinished and half-baked. It clearly needed a lot more work. I think this plays more like an early beta version of the level, as it is clearly playable but very glitchy and never starts to get going after introducing its set pieces. Stallwoman, your primary gimmick in the stage, wasn't implemented very well. On our first time through the level, okay, saying R, so I'm guessing this one was maybe after Ace Spark had basically a surrogate playing through the stages for them, and they were just witnessing due to the hand injury stuff. On our first time through the level, it broke in the first room and never appeared again. Yeah, I think that's kinda how things went for me too. Even when she worked, it wasn't clear how she worked and what the point was. If you can replace your gimmick with a wall and have the level function better, there are clearly some issues with it. It was a confused, unnecessary mess of a gimmick which actively harms the experience of the player. I really liked the mini versions of the mini-bosses. They were a very cute idea and in several places created challenges that are rarely seen in Mega Man levels, because the mini-boss mechanics are not able to be used frequently. For instance, the hot dog ladder room was a nice twist on an ordinary timing challenge, with the arcing projectiles being an unusual obstacle. The reimagining of the Kamegoro Maker as a robot master is certainly novel, and aside from the gaps between tornadoes being too small, it was a nice simple end to the stage. The fight with Stall Woman is just as confusing as the rest of her implementation, and ends up being a significant drag on the end of the stage. The idea of surviving might have been interesting if the times given to the player were reasonable, but the jump between 1 and 5 minutes is absurd. There should have been an option of 2. The boss's patterns feel all over the place because they seem to change based on random damage amounts, though I can't be sure of this. A good boss is one you can work out with a bit of effort, and this one was too confusing to achieve that. The stage is incredibly buggy. Between Stall Woman breaking, tornadoes shunting the player constantly, solid pits in multiple places, mini-boss rooms that do not lock the player in, so you can accidentally leave during the fight, inconsistent tornado spawner tiles, not good. The aesthetics of the stage were nice, with well-drawn and animated sprites and a good-looking tile set. However, there is virtually no atmosphere to the level. It feels very generic, and given how quiet the music was, the sound effects got very grating very quickly, especially the hyoi. Not sure what's meant by that one. So before getting onto my thoughts on this one proper, there is something that I do wonder. Because in Mick's commentary, he mentioned wanting to fix things here before release. And so I do kind of wonder, how much did they go in and change between what was submitted to them and what is playable in the contest here? And another reason I do kind of wonder this is, honestly, even as jank as the stage was, even though, yes, it did do some psychic damage to me just through sheer confusion as to what was going on sometimes, I don't know that I would have said that this stage warrants a skip teleporter. It's one of those things, I have definitely played worse offenders in this contest that I can see why a skip teleporter was put in. This one, I don't know, while janky, it was still overall playable, I would say. Though yes, I did definitely run into my fair share of jankiness between Stall Woman just completely vanishing after my first attempt at going through the stage, so her actual stage gimmick, I didn't really get to experience it. Weirdness of inconsistency, especially with the downward moving tornadoes that you're supposed to use to get through certain areas. Once I had them work properly as a platform, once I fell straight through them. So, that was weird. And yeah, there are the odd things like the boss music not replaying for heavy if you go back into his room after dealing with Stall Woman. Overall, a lot of my own trouble with this stage, I would have gotten through it a lot easier if I had noticed I had been picking up keys. I do kind of wish there was a better way of conveying that, not just her throwing them out randomly to where if you're standing too close, you just instantly get it and don't immediately see what she even gave you. Like I said in post on the main stage video, I think I did see the keys in the top display out of the corner of my eye, but I thought that was just like some kind of display of these are your goals, these are the ones you've unlocked, and I couldn't really interpret what all that meant. And it had been a while since I played a stage where keys were actually a thing, so I just thought it was something like, you met this goal, but I wasn't getting any tokens, which I figured were something there, and I just didn't think to go through the gate into the next room. I figured the gate was just to get back down to where Heavy was. So yeah, the end of the stage, it is a bit confusing in how it's telegraphed to the player. I do think a bit more could have been said there. I think it might have helped a bit if there was some rearrangement of rooms there. That, like, if before going in to fight Stall Woman, you went through a room that had the locked gates showing the tokens there, so you realize, oh, okay, I have to get some keys. Then go in and fight Stall Woman and see, oh, and this is where I get the keys. Possibly with some better indicator of what the goals are. I think that would have helped. But overall, I do think the concept is interesting. There's some good stuff here. There is some really interesting stuff here, and I'm on the side of Stallwoman as an actual boss. Yeah, she's weird, but in a very interesting way. I had fun with that. It is just a shame that, yeah, the stage is definitely, as said, held together with prayers, silly string, and duct tape. I would love to see a more polished version of this stage where Stallwoman is fully integrated in the way that you wanted her to be. I would have loved to see what that would have been like. But overall, like I said, interesting idea, and I'm interested to see what you might pull off in the future. But with that, that's all for now. Thank you very much for watching. I hope you're enjoying the series so far, and I shall see you again next time. Until then, yeah, this delay was brought to you by quite the week, up to and including our power being out for a full day, and a loud generator going right outside my room, just the other side of my the other side of my wall, right outside the house. It's been fun times. Yeah, fare thee well. Also, I wonder if anybody actually noticed. And I'm just gonna leave it at that.